Rome, 1982. A city of faith, and of secrets. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica toll across the Vatican City, echoing over marble rooftops and narrow cobbled alleys. Tourists gather under the colonnades, snapping photographs of the Pope's window. Pilgrims kneel on the cold stone, whispering prayers into the wind. And somewhere, deep behind the ornate walls, numbers are being altered. The Vatican Bank, officially known as the Istituto per l'Opere di Religioni, the Institute for Works of Religion, was never meant to be a bank. It was meant to be holy ground for sacred finance, donations, missionary funds, charity accounts. But by the early 1980s, the vault beneath St. Peter's had turned into a vault of sin. Billions flowed in from shell companies in Panama, from offshore trusts in the Bahamas, from Italian businessmen with smiling faces and black briefcases. The Vatican, the smallest state in the world, had become one of the most powerful financial players in Europe, and one of the least accountable. Somewhere within those accounts, a storm was brewing. The man at the center of it, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the American head of the Vatican Bank, was often called God's banker. Towering, confident, and untouchable, he once said, "You can't run the church on Hail Marys." But behind the marble desk and the golden crucifix, Marcinkus was surrounded by ghosts, politicians, mafiosi, and bankers who smiled in daylight and vanished by night. And then, one morning, the Vatican awoke to the news that $1.3 billion was missing. Gone. Vanished into the quiet folds of divine secrecy. The scandal would unravel the Vatican's reputation, claim multiple lives, and leave one man hanging beneath a London bridge, his pockets stuffed with stones, a priest's collar around his neck. It wasn't just a heist. It was an exorcism of faith. The year was 1978. Rome was still trembling from the kidnapping and murder of Prime Minister Aldo Moro by the Red Brigades. Political terror haunted the streets. But inside Vatican walls, another terror was rising, made of numbers, ledgers, and power. Archbishop Paul Marcinkus wasn't a theologian. He was a strategist, 6'4", Chicago-born, with the voice of a soldier and the instincts of a CEO. Under Pope Paul VI, he was tasked with modernizing the Vatican's finances. What he built instead was an empire, and a maze. By 1979, the Vatican Bank controlled hundreds of offshore accounts. Money from Italy's largest banks flowed through them, especially through one man, Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano. Calvi was nicknamed God's banker by the press, but the Vatican called him something else, Il Ragionier di Dio, the accountant of God. He promised Marcinkus he could multiply the church's wealth while keeping it invisible to regulators. Together, they created a secret network of holding companies, dummy corporations that funneled Vatican money into private deals, construction firms, and, allegedly, political slush funds. But not all of that money came from clean hands. Some came from the Banda della Magliana, Rome's most notorious criminal syndicate. Other parts came from mafia-linked laundering networks in Sicily, washing heroin profits through the holy books. The Vatican had become a laundering paradise. To the outside world, everything looked pristine. The Pope preached about poverty. The bank expanded its real estate and offshore bonds. The contradiction was biblical. In 1981, Pope John Paul II, still new to the papal throne, began to notice strange reports. A Polish aide brought him a dossier marked Riservato, confidential. It contained the first whispers of fraud. Inside, coded transfers, missing balances, and a trail of Vatican funds leading to shell accounts in Luxembourg and Panama. When the Pope asked Marcinkus for an explanation, the Archbishop smiled. "Holy Father, These are operational complexities. Nothing unholy. But the Pope's eyes darkened. Even he could feel the smell of smoke behind the incense. In Milan, Banco Ambrosiano's headquarters gleamed like a cathedral of finance, marble floors, gold-lettered walls. Calvi's office perched high above the city like a throne. Beneath him worked men who knew how to make money disappear. By 1981, Banco Ambrosiano had collapsed under the weight of secret loans. The Vatican Bank was its largest shareholder, though officially, it denied responsibility. When Italian investigators began digging, they discovered hundreds of millions had been transferred out of Italy, disguised as charitable funds. A memo recovered from a burned file contained the words, "Funds relocated under authority of IOR for mission activities." IOR, the Institute for Works of Religion. The Vatican Bank. But where did the money go? Investigators traced some of it to South American shell companies, others to banks in Panama and Nassau. One curious trail led to Nicaragua, into accounts tied to the Contras, anti-communist rebels funded covertly by Western interests. The Vatican wasn't just laundering money. It was financing wars. Meanwhile, Roberto Calvi grew paranoid. He believed the Masonic Lodge Propaganda Do, or P2, was closing in on him. P2 wasn't a normal fraternity. It was a secret network of powerful men, generals, politicians, bankers, and media magnates. Its Grand Master, Licio Gelli, was called the Puppet Master of Italy. And P2 had deep roots inside both Banco Ambrosiano and the Vatican. Documents later recovered from Gelli's villa listed Calvi and Marcinkus among its associates. As the Italian government began preparing indictments, Calvi fled Rome. He was terrified. Not of the police, but of the people above them. He left behind a letter to his wife, Graziella. "If they find me dead, it won't be suicide." June 18, 1982. London, 7:30 a.m. A postman walking along the Thames under Blackfriars Bridge stopped when he saw something swinging. A man, hanging by the neck from scaffolding beneath the bridge, his suit damp from the mist. In his pockets, £15,000 in cash, 5 bricks, and a rosary. The ID read, Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano. The British police initially ruled it suicide. But the scene was too theatrical, too symbolic. Blackfriars, frati neri in Italian, meant black monks, a nickname for the Masonic Brotherhood P2. The symbolism was clear. It was a message. Later forensic analysis showed Calvi's neck injuries were inconsistent with self-hanging. Dirt on his shoes suggested he had been killed elsewhere and hung afterward. Meanwhile, in Rome, Archbishop Marcinkus locked himself in his office. He refused interviews, refused subpoenas, and invoked Vatican sovereignty. The Holy See declared him immune to prosecution. Calvi's widow screamed into microphones. They killed him because he knew too much. The Italian parliament opened a special investigation. A senator called it the darkest chapter in church history. But within the Vatican walls, there was silence. The vaults were closed. The ledgers sealed. And the money? Still gone. The morning after Calvi's body was discovered, Rome woke up to fear. Newspapers splashed the photo of his corpse across their front pages, God's banker dead in London. But inside the Vatican, there were no newspapers on desks. Only whispers. Archbishop Marcinkus ordered immediate security lockdown of the bank offices. Access to financial archives was restricted to 3 cardinals. In the following days, a quiet purge began. Employees who had handled Ambrosiano accounts were transferred or quietly dismissed. When one mid-level accountant, Giovanni Angelini, threatened to go to the Italian authorities, He vanished on his drive home to Albano Laziale. His car was found 2 days later on a remote hillside, burned. The license plates removed. The coroner noted his hands were missing. That week, the Vatican received a diplomatic note from the Italian Treasury requesting full cooperation. The reply was swift. The Institute for Works of Religion is a sovereign entity. No external jurisdiction applies. Translation: you can't touch us. But outside those walls, someone else was moving. A young journalist named Maria Grazia Rizzo, working for L'Espresso, began piecing together Calvi's final months. She discovered a pattern: every major transaction between Banco Ambrosiano and the Vatican Bank was linked to accounts under false religious foundations: Missions of the Sacred Cross, Society of the Holy Pilgrim, Foundation of St. Michael. None of them actually existed. Rizzo's articles painted a portrait of a financial church built on illusion, a cathedral of numbers and lies. And it began shaking the Vatican to its core. One cardinal, privately interviewed by a BBC crew, said, "There are men here who fear confession more than God." Summer, 1982. Pope John Paul II looked older that year, his shoulders hunched, his eyes weary. Every morning he received intelligence briefings from the Secretariat of State, warning him that the Vatican's credibility was disintegrating. He summoned Archbishop Marcinkus to the papal palace. The meeting lasted 2 hours behind closed doors. No one knows what was said, but witnesses recall Marcinkus walking out pale and silent. Later that evening, the Pope made an uncharacteristic gesture. He visited the Vatican Bank himself. Inside the cold marble halls, the echo of his cane against the floor was the only sound. He paused before the heavy vault door, then whispered to his secretary, "Even here, the devil counts." The Pope wanted a quiet cleanup, not a scandal. But how do you cleanse sin when it's printed on banknotes? Behind the scenes, Marcinkus proposed an extraordinary solution. The Vatican would pay a partial restitution to cover Banco Ambrosiano's collapse, around $250 million, a gesture of moral concern. But this wasn't charity. It was a settlement to buy silence. The payment was never called restitution. Officially, it was an act of pastoral compassion. Still, it didn't stop the bleeding. More investigators appeared, not from Italy this time, but from Switzerland. They uncovered accounts linked to arms deals, black funds, and political bribes channeled through Vatican fronts. And every path led back to one signature: Archbishop Paul Marcinkus. By autumn, Marcinkus was effectively imprisoned within the Vatican walls. Italian police surrounded the gates but couldn't enter. He had become a fugitive protected by faith, and by the Pope's shield. At night, the lights in his office stayed on until dawn. Witnesses claimed he was destroying papers. Others said he was writing a confession. But whatever truth he held, it never left those walls. The deaths began quietly. In September 1982, a body was found floating in the Tiber River, Calvi's private secretary, Graziella Caroccia. Official report: suicide. She had fallen from her office window at Banco Ambrosiano's Milan branch. Before her death, she left a note that read, "May God forgive those who have destroyed the faith of so many." 2 months later, a security officer assigned to the Vatican Bank, Sergio Vaccari, was found dead in his apartment. Gunshot to the mouth. Police called it suicide. Then, in London, a broker who managed Ambrosiano's offshore accounts suffered a heart attack while jogging in Hyde Park. No autopsy was released. It was as if the trail was being erased one body at a time. Rizzo, the journalist, received an anonymous envelope one night. Inside was a single black and white photograph of Calvi's body under Blackfriars Bridge, but from a different angle. The photo revealed a small pendant under his collar, the Cross of the Knights of Malta. The Order of Malta, another sovereign Catholic entity, and another key shareholder in the Vatican Bank. When she tried to publish the image, her editor received a threat. 2 men visited her home in the early hours of the morning. She moved to Paris and never returned to Italy. The case files began disappearing, too. By 1984, Italian prosecutors announced that insufficient evidence prevented further charges. Marcinkus remained at the Vatican, untouchable, while Licio Gelli of P2 escaped to Argentina. The Vatican Bank, though scarred, survived. But inside, a different kind of rot remained, one that couldn't be exorcised by prayers or papal decrees. A decade later, 1993. Rome has changed. The Cold War has ended. John Paul II is old, his hair silver under the Vatican lights. The scandals of the 80s are a fading whisper, until one evening, an envelope appears on his desk. No stamp. No signature. Inside, a short note. The books were never balanced. Alongside it, a single photo. A grainy image of a ledger stamped with the Vatican seal, showing a $1.3 billion discrepancy. The missing money. The Pope's secretary called for immediate verification, but the archives could not find any such record. The page didn't exist, not anymore. A week later, a janitor found a priest dead in the Vatican gardens, sitting upright on a bench, rosary clutched in his hands. The body was identified as Father Pietro Colombo, a low-level clerk in the Secretariat of State. In his room, shredded financial documents, all marked IOR. That night, thunder rolled over Rome. In the dark, lightning flashed across the dome of St. Peter's. Rain washed over the statues of saints, their marble eyes staring down like silent witnesses to a crime the Church could never confess. The Vatican Bank was restructured in 1994, new faces, new regulations, new promises of transparency. But among old files, a priest once found a ledger that didn't belong to any department. Handwritten, brittle with age. On its cover, a single Latin phrase, Fides et Pecunia. Faith and money. Inside, the last page contained a simple entry. June 18, 1982, deposit received. Not yet withdrawn. And below it, a faded signature. Arth Calvi. There's a saying whispered among Vatican insiders, the Church forgets nothing. It just prays for it. 40 years later, the Vatican Bank still exists, still sovereign, still secret. Its corridors smell of wax and paper, its vaults hum like tombs. New managers promise accountability. They open press offices, issue statements, and publish annual reports. But for all the polished words and digital transparency, one truth remains: no one ever found the missing $1.3 billion. Some say it was absorbed into covert Cold War funding, used to influence elections, arm rebellions, or stabilize friendly regimes. Others whisper it was stolen by the mafia, hidden in Swiss accounts under holy pseudonyms. And a few, those who've seen the Vatican's inner machinery, believe the money was never meant to exist at all. That it was the price of silence, a debt written into the soul of the Church itself. When Archbishop Paul Marcinkus died in Arizona in 2006, he was still under sealed investigation. His grave bore no title, no banker of God, no Archbishop of Finance. Only his name, carved in marble, and the Latin phrase, Fidelis usque ad finem. Faithful until the end. But faith and loyalty are not the same. Somewhere in the archives beneath St. Peter's, a light flickers above rows of locked cabinets. A clerk dusts a file that hasn't been opened in decades. The leather is cracked. The clasp still golden. When the key turns, the hinges whisper, and for a moment, the air smells like incense and blood. Then, silence. The kind only the divine can hear.